Let's talk about something that most people never understand about avoidance, especially when they suddenly pop back into your life after disappearing without explanation. You think they missed you. You think they had a change of heart. You tell yourself they woke up and realized what they lost. Let me tell you the truth, and it's going to sting a little. They're not coming back because they lost you. They're coming back because they lost control of the narrative. Avoidant individuals are experts in one thing: emotional escape artistry. They pull away not because you did something wrong, but because closeness exposes a part of them they can't bear to face. The part that's afraid, unhealed, and disconnected from intimacy. So when they vanish, it's not personal, it's patterned, it's programmed, it's what they always do. But here's where it gets interesting, and this is the part no one teaches you. When you go silent, when you stop reacting, when you remove your emotional energy from the equation, you trigger something far more powerful than nostalgia. You trigger confusion. See, in their mind, they had the whole thing mapped out. I'll disappear, they'll chase, I'll stay distant, they'll try harder. That loop feeds their need for emotional superiority. It protects their fragile identity. But when you don't do what they expect, when you don't reach out, don't plead, don't beg, don't ask why, they don't feel free. They feel out of control. And for someone whose entire attachment strategy is based on staying one step ahead emotionally, that's terrifying. They start replaying the narrative, trying to find the part where they were supposed to be the one in charge. But now the power dynamic has shifted, and not because you forced it, but because you stopped participating in their game. And let me be clear, avoidants don't miss your presence as much as they miss the predictability of your presence. They're not reconnecting because they suddenly discovered your value. They're reconnecting because your absence disrupted the illusion that they were the one holding all the cards. And that illusion, that's their drug. That illusion makes them feel safe, superior, in control. When that illusion dies, their ego panics. Not their heart, their ego. This is where you have to be stronger than your emotions, because your heart will want to read the return as redemption, as growth, as love finally coming around. But if you look closely, you'll see something different. You'll see someone trying to retake control of the story. Someone who's less concerned with healing and more obsessed with reclaiming the role they played in your life. That's why silence is so powerful. It's not passive, it's not weakness, it's not giving up. It's the ultimate counter move to a person who thrives on reaction. Silence rewrites the script. So the next time they reappear with a text, a DM, a sudden "I've been thinking about you," don't rush to assign meaning. Ask yourself, are they reconnecting out of realization, or are they panicking because they no longer have the emotional upper hand? The answer to that question changes everything. Because at the end of the day, their return is not proof of love. It's proof that your withdrawal had power. And now they want the pin back. Don't give it to them. Let them sit in the silence they created. Let them feel the discomfort they tried to dump on you. Let them see what happens when the person they underestimated wakes up. Because the real power isn't in their return. It's in your response. Let's strip away the romantic illusions for a second. When an avoidant disappears and then eventually comes back, most people think it's about missing you. But what's really happening underneath is far deeper and darker than that. See, avoidants don't return because they suddenly feel safe with you. They return because your absence confronts them with something they've spent their entire life avoiding, themselves. Avoidant attachment isn't just a relational pattern, it's a survival strategy. It's not about not wanting love, it's about fearing what love demands. Vulnerability, openness, exposure. And the truth is, avoidants don't fear you, they fear the version of themselves that closeness exposes. When you're present, consistently showing love and emotional availability, it pushes up against every scar they've buried. Their nervous system interprets intimacy as invasion, so they pull back, disappear, ghost, distract, rationalize, and in their absence, they feel a temporary sense of relief, like they've escaped the emotional pressure cooker. But then something happens. You stop reaching out, you stop explaining yourself, you stop filling in the gaps for their behavior, and for the first time in a long time, they're left alone with themselves. And that's when it begins. The inner unraveling. Your silence doesn't just echo in their inbox, it echoes in their psyche. All the noise they used to drown out their emotional wounds, whether it's work, distractions, situationships, or surface level control, suddenly goes quiet. And in that silence, all the voices they've been suppressing start to get louder. I'm not good enough. I always ruin good things. Why can't I connect with anyone? What if no one ever stays? That silence becomes a mirror. Not the kind that reflects your worth, but the kind that reflects their unresolved pain, the part they've run from in every relationship, the part that intimacy tried to reach, but they slammed the door on, and now that door is locked from the inside, and they're the only ones left in the room. And this is why their return isn't always rooted in love. Sometimes it's rooted in emotional disorientation. They can't recognize themselves without your reflection there to define them. Your presence gave them contrast, gave them meaning, even if they rejected it. Your absence, it forces them to meet the void without distraction. Most people don't understand how psychologically destabilizing that is for an avoidant. They've built their identity around emotional autonomy, around being untouchable. But now the game is flipped. The person they thought would always be there isn't reaching back, the role they cast you in. The chaser, the emotional one, the dependable fallback. You're no longer playing it, and in your silence, they're faced with the terrifying possibility that they were never in control to begin with. Now, that doesn't mean they've healed, doesn't mean they're ready to love, but it does mean the mask is cracking. And often, that's when they come back, not to give you love, but to borrow your light so they don't have to sit in the dark. This is why it's so important not to interpret their return at face value. Ask yourself, are they here for connection, or are they running from their own silence? Because if you're not careful, you'll let someone back into your life, not because they're ready to grow, but because they're terrified of doing it alone. So remember this, sometimes your presence brings them comfort, but your absence forces them to evolve. Let them sit in the silence. That silence is doing the work their words never could. Let's break another illusion wide open, because this is where so many people get emotionally trapped. When an avoidant reappears after disappearing, it feels like a breakthrough, like some divine moment of clarity finally hit them. But let me be very clear. Most of the time, that return is not coming from a place of growth. It's coming from survival. Avoidants are wired to disconnect when emotions intensify. It's not a moral failure. It's a nervous system response that's been conditioned over time. Closeness makes them feel out of control, and so they vanish to reset their emotional baseline. Here's the part nobody talks about. Once they pull away, once they disappear, that initial relief starts to fade. And what replaces it isn't longing, it's instability. You gotta understand the psychology here. When you go no contact, when you stop initiating, when you stop feeding the connection with your energy, it throws their internal world into chaos. Their system was used to emotional dominance. You pursue, they retreat. You reach out, they decide. But now, with no input from you, there's no signal to react to, and that absence, it disorients them. Think of it like this. Avoidants are not operating from emotional abundance. They're operating from emotional scarcity. They keep distance to regulate the little security they feel inside. So when you withdraw your presence, you're not just removing a person, you're removing their emotional compass. That reconnection you get, that text, that sudden, hey stranger, that breadcrumb of curiosity, it's not some epiphany of love. It's a coping mechanism. It's a desperate attempt to stabilize their emotional system. Because the silence isn't peaceful anymore, it's threatening. And not because they fear losing love, but because they fear losing psychological control. Let's go even deeper. When an avoidant reaches back out, they're often not even aware of why they're doing it. It's instinctual, it's reactive. It's like their nervous system is trying to plug a leak they don't know how to seal. They might say they miss you. They might talk about memories. But if you listen closely, you'll notice something's off. Their words won't match their actions. The emotions will feel shallow, the intentions unclear. Why? Because they're not returning to connect, they're returning to regulate. They want to know you're still there, that they still have emotional access, that the door isn't fully closed. And once they feel that sense of safety again, many of them retreat right back into avoidance because the very connection they crave is also what terrifies them. And if you're not careful, you'll get caught in a dangerous loop. You mistake their panic for passion, their instability for sincerity, but what you're really experiencing is someone trying to relieve their internal discomfort, not someone ready to build something emotionally real. That's why emotional maturity means not reacting to the return. It means asking the hard questions. Is this person showing up differently, or are they just reacting to the void I created when I chose my peace over their pattern? Because if someone is only showing up to soothe themselves and not to grow with you, you're not in a relationship. You're in a cycle that always ends the same. Connection, withdrawal, confusion. Rinse, repeat. So here's the truth that will set you free. The person who comes back out of survival will never love you in a way that helps you thrive. Let them come back. Let them say what they need to say, but don't confuse their return with readiness. Your peace doesn't need their panic to prove its worth. Let's pull back the curtain on something most people don't even see happening, because when avoidants come back after disappearing, they're not always looking for love, connection, or reconciliation. Sometimes they're looking for relief from shame. Not healing, not repair, just a temporary way to numb the sting of guilt that catches up to them in silence. See, avoidants are emotional escapists. They don't run because they don't care. They run because they don't know how to care in a way that feels safe. But what they don't anticipate is what happens after they're running. There's a cost, an emotional residue, a buildup of guilt and discomfort they thought they could avoid by ghosting or pulling away. That haunting silence you feel after they vanish, believe it or not, they feel something too. But here's the twist. It's not necessarily the pain of missing you. It's the psychological weight of having violated their own internal values. They don't like how they left. They don't like what it says about them. They don't like the reflection they see in the mirror. So what do? They come back, not always to take accountability, but to seek absolution. If they can get you to respond, if they can get you to welcome them back or validate them in any way, it soothes their shame. It's like pressing an emotional reset button. They don't have to face the reality of what they did or who they became, because your attention allows them to reframe the story. To them, your willingness to engage again means they're not the villain. It rewrites the narrative just enough to let them sleep at night. And the worst part, most of this happens beneath the surface. They're not sitting there consciously plotting this out. It's subconscious emotional damage control. Avoidants struggle deeply with emotional responsibility. They want connection, but only on their terms, terms that don't require vulnerability, repair, or true ownership. So instead of doing the deep inner work, they use your forgiveness as a shortcut to feel better. That breadcrumb text, that casual "how have you been?" It's often less about you and more about easing their discomfort. And this is where emotional discernment becomes critical. You have to ask yourself, is this person reaching out to repair the damage, or are they just trying to relieve themselves of the guilt they created? Because here's what people don't realize. Your silence not only created distance, it created a mirror. And that mirror is brutal. For the first time, they're forced to see themselves without your emotional labor cleaning up the mess. They see the text they never responded to, the love they walked away from, the loyalty they treated like an option, and that awareness hurts. But instead of transforming it into growth, they try to soothe it with reconnection. But make no mistake, relief is not redemption. Don't confuse an apology with accountability. Don't confuse a check-in with change. If someone comes back just to make themselves feel better without offering anything better, you owe it to yourself not to reopen the wound. Because at the end of the day, you are not someone's emotional bandage. You are not a rehab center for people who break hearts and they want to be comforted for the pain they cause. You're not here to fix the shame they earn through their own avoidance. And if they really want peace, if they really want redemption, they'll have to earn it through action, not access. So remember this. If their return is about easing their guilt instead of honoring your worth, it's not love, it's damage control. And you were never meant to be someone else's way of avoiding themselves. So here's the psychological curveball no one sees coming. Avoidants aren't just afraid of intimacy, They're afraid of the emotions you awaken in them. And when you disappear, when you go quiet and stop playing into the dynamic, it doesn't create peace for them. It creates emotional pressure. The same kind of pressure they ran from in the first place. And ironically, that pressure builds not in your presence, but in your absence. Avoidants aren't emotionless. They're overwhelmed by emotions they never learned how to process. Their childhood, their past experiences, something along the way taught them that emotions equal chaos, vulnerability equals danger, and needing someone means weakness. So when someone shows up with depth, consistency, and presence, their survival brain kicks in. They disappear, they detach, they freeze or flee. But here's the truth that sneaks up on them. Just because they left doesn't mean the emotional impact left with them. When they walked away, they expected relief, emotional calm, a reset. But that's not what happens, because your absence doesn't erase the internal shift your presence triggered. You awakened something they weren't ready to feel. But now that it's been stirred, it won't go back to sleep. And this is why they come back, not because they've processed those emotions, but because they can't suppress them anymore. You became a mirror, and when you stepped away, that mirror stayed in their mind. The connection you built wasn't just physical or conversational. It was neurological. You carved out new emotional patterns in their brain. They're not just thinking about you. They're haunted by what you made them feel. Let's go even deeper. Emotional suppression is a ticking time bomb. You can run, you can distract, you can rationalize, but emotions don't die, they store. And when someone like you enters their life and activates those buried emotions, longing, desire, fear, hope, regret, those feelings don't vanish when they ghost you. They amplify quietly, invisibly, until the weight becomes unbearable. So now they're not reaching out because they've had some profound spiritual epiphany. They're reaching out because the emotional pressure inside them is finally louder than their fear of vulnerability. That pressure, ironically, is a byproduct of your silence. You didn't chase, you didn't beg, you didn't demand clarity, and that choice to detach with dignity created more impact than 1,000 words ever could. This is where many people get caught off guard. They confuse their return with readiness, but it's not always about wanting to build. Sometimes it's about wanting to release. They want to feel less of the emotional weight, less confusion, less tension, and they think reconnecting with you will relieve it. But here's the hard truth. That pressure they feel isn't your responsibility. It's not your job to be their emotional outlet. If they were overwhelmed by the emotions you sparked, then they need to grow into the kind of person who can handle the depth you brought into their life, not run back to you every time the pressure peaks. Because until they face that pressure on their own, they'll always associate intimacy with threat. And you'll be stuck in the role of the trigger, not the partner. So when they come back, ask yourself this. Is this person finally ready to sit in the fire of their emotions without running? Or are they just looking for another escape hatch? Because a connection that can't hold emotional pressure will never hold long-term potential. And remember this, just because you triggered their growth doesn't mean you have to stay and supervise it. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is leave the pressure where it belongs. This is the paradox that turns everything on its head. Avoidants crave love, but fear the cost of being loved deeply. They want connection, yet they sabotage the very closeness they secretly long for. And when they come back after disappearing, it's not just about guilt or pressure or fear of losing control. It's about curiosity, a haunting, almost compulsive curiosity that asks, did I matter? Was I safe to love? Would they still choose me even after all this? See, people with avoidant tendencies often carry this deep, unspoken belief. If someone truly knew me, they wouldn't stay. That belief isn't just psychological, it's biological. It's wired into their nervous system through years of emotional rejection, neglect, or inconsistent affection. So when they first feel love, their brain fires off danger signals. They disconnect, they run, they disappear. But the human heart is complex, and emotional disconnection doesn't erase emotional impact. After the silence, after the space, When the noise of distraction fades, something subtle begins to stir inside them, and that stirring is rooted in the mystery you left behind when you chose not to chase them. Your silence doesn't just punish them, it intrigues them. It forces them to sit with the echo of your absence, and in that silence, the avoidant starts asking questions that have nothing to do with you and everything to do with them. They start wondering why they reacted the way they did, why your presence brought out feelings they didn't know how to handle, why their default pattern, escape, suddenly feels less safe than it used to. Because this time, when they ran, you didn't follow. And that breaks the script. Understand this, avoidants thrive on predictability. They subconsciously expect you to pursue, to reach out, to give them the power of emotional distance. But when you hold your ground, when you refuse to abandon your self-worth to soothe their fear, it rewrites the internal map they've been navigating for years. And suddenly, you're not just someone they left behind, you're someone they don't understand. And curiosity is powerful. Curiosity pulls them back into your orbit, not necessarily because they're ready to love you the way you deserve, but because your emotional restraint makes them question everything they thought they knew about relationships. You became the exception to their rule. And that realization, it gnaws at them. Because for the first time, they aren't sure where they stand. You didn't collapse under the weight of their withdrawal. You didn't beg for their return. And that strength forces them to reevaluate your value, not because it changed, but because they finally had space to see it. But here's where you must be fiercely honest with yourself. Just because someone returns out of curiosity doesn't mean they've changed. You may have awakened something in them, but awakening is not the same as action. Their intrigue with you is not proof of growth. It's evidence of internal conflict, a tug of war between who they've been and who they could be. So when they come back, asking questions, testing the waters, hovering at the edge of connection again, you have a choice. You can interpret their curiosity as hope, or you can recognize it for what it is, a sign that you've become unforgettable, not because you chased them, but because you didn't. Never confuse curiosity with commitment. Their fascination with your silence doesn't mean they're ready to meet your depth. It means they're finally aware they lost something they didn't know how to keep. And that awareness, that's not your invitation to go back. That's your confirmation that walking away was the moment you finally became undeniable. So let them wonder. Let them feel the weight of your absence. Because if they return just to explore the mystery, but not to build something real, then they don't deserve access to the masterpiece they once abandoned.